YouTube. I found it on YouTube too.
You did?
Yeah, there's some good stuff out there. Actually, you were talking about exercise. Funny thing, huh?
Oh, funny.
So,
Hi, everybody.
thank you.
Sorry for the technical. Do I need this? No. I've never needed it before.
I don't either. Thank you.
Well, so the first question I have is the 50-50 thing. I thought that the person who split the 50-50 was the person who drew the name. The great thing about today in particular, first of all, I love you guys, you know that. We've been together for over 20 years, but I see some people in here that I've known for about 42 years. Dr. Ed Jones, I've known that long. I was 6 when I met him. Yeah, right. And lovely Anne, who I've known, I'm not sure how long, Anne. Is that right? Oh my God. And
When did you start?
when did I start? 1970. Yeah.
She was 6.
Wow.
And of course Betsy for 50 years.
And Jim Wood, who I haven't seen for I don't know how long, but it's a pleasure to see you, Jim. And of course, my old mainstays, my young mainstays, Pat and Pat are here. Carol and of course Terry and Ruby were among the first people who joined our graduate school of pulmonary rehabilitation at El Camino College. So I was trying to figure out something that would be new and different and would keep people awake after lunch. And I know how easy it is to sort of snooze after having a nice lunch. So I thought, you know, we talk about, well, what else is there about exercise? I mean, most people know that exercise is good for us, right? Is there anybody who doesn't believe that? Well, spend a couple of minutes with me and I think I'll change your mind. And for lung disease, we consider it to be essential. The expert guidelines tell us that it is at least as important as oxygen therapy for those people who require oxygen therapy. So exercise should be a part of every person who has COPD, every person's lifestyle. Whether you get it in a formal group or on your own, so long as it's regular and adequate, it's very, very important. Well, the typical ways in which we exercise, you see here with endurance type exercise like walking or cycling, resistance exercise, which trains our muscles to become bigger and stronger, more effective. We do a little stretching and flexibility, and I'm delighted to hear that you are now in the rehab program doing some balance and stability training as well. I think that's so important as we get older, not only for just normal posture and getting along in our day, but also as a fall prevention strategy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. So the question is there anything new under the sun? Is there anything else that we might consider? Well, part one of this, the first of the two perspectives, is how we go about exercising. One of the most current thinking on this topic is the intensity with which we exercise. Now, this has been researched in healthy younger and older people for decades. I first learned this as an undergraduate student back in the day. It was a Tuesday, I think. But most recently, it's been studied in most chronic disease states, including COPD, heart disease. People who have chronic heart failure, congestive heart failure, are now doing high-intensity exercise training. They're doing it safely and without adverse events. Of course, the situation has to be good, very carefully supervised, and a progression of exercise training that will allow people to do that. And I'll speak more to that issue a little bit later. It's also been used in people who have diabetes, in obese individuals, in frail elderly. So it's becoming more widespread, more widely studied. So this might be something that we consider, and as I say, I'll give you a little bit more detail shortly. The same is true with how we go about strengthening our muscles. I'm always sort of amused when people tell me they do their strength training and they have their 5-pound dumbbells. Well, 5-pound dumbbells might be good for some things for a while, but it's not good for most things for the long term. In order to get the muscles bigger, we have to do more. We have to use more than those 5-pound weights. And we know that as we get stronger, that has to increase even further. So there's this legend that goes back 2,000 years to Milo of Crotona, a city in Greece. The legend says that as a young boy, Milo started lifting the family's newborn calf. He would lift this calf up, put it on his shoulders, and walk around the farm. So calves, of course, grow. And as the calf grew, Milo grew, of course. And with repetitive lifting of this added load, this added resistance, over time it was said that he was able to put the bull on his shoulder and carry the bull. And the further legend has it, and this is a little tough to swallow, but supposedly he walked the length of the Olympic Stadium. And after he walked the length of the stadium, they butchered the calf, he ate it all, and died from indigestion. Pure legend, at least on that last part. But the point is, if we're going to make our muscles bigger and stronger, it's a progressive thing. You know, years ago when I was working with many of you in the room in our pulmonary rehab program, one person asked me, well, when do I get to stop progressing? When do I get to stop adding more? So how do you think I answered that? Never. Never. You know, in our situation, we want to keep advancing as much as we could because it's only going to make our lives easier for us. We're going to have a better handle on our functional limitations, and we will overcome many of those limitations. Well, this high-intensity exercise shouldn't be done all the time. I'll give you some guidelines for that a little bit later. It should be done with careful supervision. Somebody needs to probably monitor you the first couple of times that you do it in order to assure that it is safe. And it should be done with progression from easier high intensity to a little bit harder in a process that we call interval training. And I will describe this to you in more detail as well. So what is high intensity endurance training? Well, it's some type of aerobic exercise where we're walking on a treadmill or outdoors, cycle ergometer, rowing machine, whatever it is that you use for your endurance type exercise. But we do it at levels of work that are higher than usual. I'll explain shortly with the graph. So for example, many of you know what the RPE scale is, right? Ratings of perceived exertion? No.
No.
No?
No.
Yes, the
The Borg scale. You know the Borg scale, yes?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I can remind you. Does that look familiar? Yeah. So if we see in the green area, moderate exercise we might consider to be, usually in the 3 to 4.5 range, with levels under 3 as considered somewhat light, easier exercise. But if you're used to exercising at, say, a 3, harder exercise for you might be a 5, for example. We wouldn't necessarily do our entire workout at a 5, but we would certainly do some of our workout at a 5. The current American Thoracic Society, European Respiratory Association practice guidelines suggest that this approach should should be encouraged whenever it is appropriate. So as you develop your fitness and become a little bit more regular and are ready to try this under the guidance of your exercise staff, then I would certainly encourage it because of the terrific benefits that come about. So how do you go about doing this? As I mentioned, supervision, and I learned a long time ago that you have to repeat things at least 3 times before we start to remember it. So supervision is really important here. We should start off with just short intervals, 30 seconds. I mean, I've done it with an obese population at 10-second intervals, 10 seconds of something harder. So that blue line you see on the graph represents something I call the tolerable level of exertion, a level of exercise that people become accustomed to. And it's difficult for them to press through that because it's uncomfortable for them. For you, it might increase your breathing a little bit. We don't want you to become real short of breath, but it's okay to increase your level of work and breathe a little bit harder. So what this shows is a little bit of a warm-up period at a comfortable rate, and then an increase to the tolerable level of exertion. So now we've gone about 7 minutes. And then for 1 minute, we're going to increase to maybe a level 6 on the Borg 0 to 10 scale. And then we recover for about 4 minutes down at a 4. And then we do 1 more of those intervals just for 1 minute, and then finish off the exercise session with a lower intensity bout of exercise to recover. As you get more fit and more used to this, you can increase the length of those intervals from 1 minute to, say, 3 minutes, 180 seconds. Or you could add intervals. Instead of just 2, you might do 3 or 4. So as I say, the benefits are good. You should avoid extreme shortness of breath. This is not good for you or for most people. So here's what we get out of it. So a payoff. Compared to continuous exercise training at a constant level that is tolerable, comfortable for you, research has shown that there's 3 times greater improvement in one's endurance. So let's say you were given a test to walk on the treadmill at a certain percentage of your ability, let's say 80%. And you were given that test before you started your exercise training. The people who were in this high-intensity interval group would end up being able to walk 3 times longer than the people who were in the continuous training after they finished some number of weeks in this particular intervention, 12, 16 weeks. So it's a big improvement in one's endurance. And the bottom line for endurance for people with COPD is you can do more without getting short of breath. To me, that's a huge advantage. People report lower levels of perceived effort. In other words, for the same task that you would normally do, whether it's exercise, doing the laundry, raking leaves on the lawn, whatever it is, your Borg rating or your perceived level of effort will be lower as compared to those who engage in continuous exercise training. People report lower levels of leg fatigue in particular, and very importantly for you all, less demand on the need to breathe, less ventilatory demand. So this pays dividends. So let's talk a little bit about resistance training, high-intensity resistance exercise training. Pat, I've got a lot of mileage out of that picture. So here we ask muscles to work harder than they usually do. So instead of being able to go through your set of 10 repetitions comfortably, now we're going to ask you to increase that resistance so it's not so comfortable anymore. You still ought to be able to finish it, but now we're talking about a more substantial effort. The general definition of high-intensity resistance exercise is something that's greater than 75% of your capacity. So let's say, for example, that you could take a dumbbell in your hand and curl it up to your shoulder with 15 pounds, and you could do it one time only. That's your 1 RM. Okay. Let me make it 16 pounds because my math will be easier if I do it that way. Okay. So if I do 16 pounds, 75% of that would be 12 pounds. Okay? So now I would do my set of 10 to 15 repetitions with that 12-pound weight, with the idea that I'm going to start getting pretty fatigued at 10 repetitions, and I may not even be able to finish 15. But that's okay, because in a few weeks you will. And then once you're able to get 15 repetitions for a few weeks in a row, then guess what you do? You add weight. So you keep on progressing, just like Milo and the bull. The most frequent approach to this is 8 to 12 repetitions with as much weight as you can safely handle in good form. And I know you've all learned what good form is in resistance training. So it's okay to just do 8 or 9 or 10. If you can do 12 repeatedly, the resistance isn't high enough. You have to add more resistance. Okay, so any type of resistance will work, whether it's machine weights, dumbbells, elastic tubing, elastic bands. Really doesn't matter what the resistance is. Even your body weight can be used as a form of resistance. So this is really important. We must establish a good base. This high-intensity resistance training is not for people just starting their exercise training with weights. Okay? It should be supervised, and my very strong belief is you shouldn't do it more than once a week. Okay? You need time to recover and be able then to train at that harder level once again. So, some of the benefits. You recognize Dr. Cassabury's name up there. He's done a little work with this idea. And Hoff is a scientist from Norway that I'll talk a little bit more about as we progress here. But in people with COPD, what they found with this high-intensity training relative to regular type of resistance training that most people do is bigger increases in strength, bigger increases in what is called the fat-free mass, FFM. Well, fat-free mass in us humans is mostly muscle if you discount water. Okay? Water does a lot of important things, but it doesn't lift objects or move things. So increasing muscle is a great functional value. Physical function, so what does that mean? It means your ability to stand up from a chair, get in and out of the bathtub, climb upstairs, go grocery shopping. All of those things become easier. In fact, they become more easier? They become easier relative to those people who do just the normal type of lower weight training. Rate of force development is a fancy way of saying that your muscles are able to contract faster. Faster is good because that represents a measure of muscle performance that is called power. It turns out that functional activities, standing up from a chair, climbing stairs, walking, are power activities. You can't stand up from a chair slowly. Honest. Would you like to try? Take my word for it. You can't do it, so you have to contract the muscle with some velocity. And I'll explain more about this in a moment. Hoff in Norway has has been one of the only people who showed that an important measure of lung function was improved with power training as well. So as you can see, similar improvements in other groups of people. We're all aging. Aging is better than not aging, I might add. Some of you may have diabetes, but we see that a great number of benefits from this type of resistance training. Well, here is Dr. Hoff's study in which they did what he called maximal strength training. So these were very vigorous efforts using the leg press exercise only. So they were training the quadriceps muscles. So to review with these little symbols up here mean that they were statistically better than the control group that did not undergo this type of higher intensity training. So this is rate of force development, how fast the muscle could contract. Their strength improved, 1 repetition maximum. Their force improved, FEV1. Their mechanical efficiency on the cycle ergometer improved. And their ability to work longer or harder improved. So these are significant findings that were found in people with not just mild COPD or moderate levels, but people with severe COPD. Big reductions in their FEV1. Very encouraging stuff. So is high intensity training for you? Always wise when you start exerting more to check with your physician and your rehab leaders. This is not something that I would embark on my own for the first time. I would want to make sure I got some instruction and guidance. Monitor your saturation, your heart rate, and blood pressure as well. Blood pressure, I think, is of importance here. Establish a good baseline, as I've mentioned, and I just so strongly encourage this approach if it is appropriate for you. The evidence-based guidelines that we have for exercise actually for pulmonary rehabilitation, period, suggest that we do consider this as good practice. Okay, so that's just sort of a review of the typical sorts of endurance and aerobic exercise training that many of you are doing in your PEP program, and that hopefully more people will be doing. Can you think of anything else that might be a good type of exercise to do on a regular basis?
Swimming.
Walking.
Swimming is a type of aerobic exercise or endurance exercise, as is walking.
Tai Chi?
Who said Tai Chi? Are you psychic? She's just stolen my whole punchline. Brilliant, brilliant. Lots of people would have said yoga, and I totally agree with that. Yoga has significant benefit, particularly for breathing, relaxation. But I have become so incredibly interested in Tai Chi. Our work in Boston is now about to secure funding to investigate the use of Tai Chi in mobility-limited older individuals as a fall prevention strategy. Rates of falling among older people are high, and the consequences of those falls for many of those people are not good. Fractures occur, and in a large percentage of people who fall with a fracture, they don't come out of the hospital. So that's not a good thing. So we'd like to try to prevent that. Okay. Let's see if this works. I have a dicey internet connection here. Maybe.
Chi nowadays because people practice Tai Chi for health and relaxation. Almost anyone, and can be practiced in any nature.
Tai Chi strengthens the mind and body. Contain much integration of the mind like body can be achieved in a river. Beneath the tranquil surface, there is a current with immense power. The power for healing and wellness. Through the ongoing practice of Tai Chi, it is suitable for almost anyone and can be practiced anywhere. The flowing movements contain much inner strength, like water flowing in a river. Beneath the tranquil
That's not quite as perfect as I would like it to have been, but we'll push on.
Sun style contains unique Qigong. It has higher stance and agile steps. Among many styles, Yang is the most popular. It was created by Yang Luchan in the early 19th century.
Okay. So this is actually evolved out of traditional Chinese medicine, and in its first form was considered a martial art. It's evolved much beyond that over these 2,600 years, and it's characterized by the slow and deliberate movements you saw on the screen, meditation during the practice of the Tai Chi, deep breathing, so that many people have referred to this form of exercise as moving meditation. The emphasis is on breathing, weight shifting. So as people learn to shift their weight, they're working on their balance. Improved balance helps to prevent falls. Where their body is in space, that body awareness helps also to reduce the risk of falling. Multiplanar movement means that we're moving in all different movement patterns. So not just forwards and backwards like we do when we're walking or swimming, for example, but also side to side, diagonally, so that we've got these kinds of movements as well, all of which change where our center of gravity is and force us to regain balance. So this is a subtle change that takes place over time. This is a short list of the benefits that have been shown as a result of people doing their Tai Chi. In the process of applying for this grant, I read well over 50 papers, research papers, on Tai Chi training as it compared to other modalities. And it very clearly has its primary emphasis on balance and stability and its impact on fall reduction. Not only on reducing the risk of falls, but reducing the fear of falling. There are individuals, I think, who are very careful in negotiating rooms, the street, parking lots, and so on, because of their worry about the possibility of a fall. And that may have been prompted by a fall they already had. So this technique of Tai Chi will delay the onset of that first fall. So instead of your first fall happening at 85, it might not happen until you're 95. Might not happen at all. But we see other improvements. Improved mobility, the ability to get around and do things every day. As I've gotten older, one of the first things that I have noticed, is it's difficult to move with the same fluidity and ease of motion. You know, if I drop something, now I can't just bend over, it's kind of like this. And so the Tai Chi helps with that. It helps in that freedom of movement. It's been shown to lower blood pressure, improve cardiopulmonary function in older adults. It helps lessen depression and allows a more positive affect. So you know what an affect is? An affect is how we present ourselves. So a person with a real positive affect is a cheery individual. You can sort of always anticipate what you're going to get when you see them. Okay? Happy, helpful, that's a positive affect. Reduce stress, improve self-efficacy, all things that are highly desirable in our life through a form of exercise that is relatively low intensity, safe. Not easy to do in the beginning because of the learning of the movement patterns, but that learning occurs quickly. So let me talk a bit about fall prevention and Tai Chi's role in fall prevention. So the American Geriatric Society has identified independent risk factors for older community dwelling individuals. So by community dwelling, we mean people who are not in a nursing home or an extended care facility, what have you. The biggest risk is if you've fallen previously. That's kind of a clue. So we see this long list. What I'd like to focus on are balance and strength. These are things that we can make significant changes in. You're doing some balance training now. You're doing some strength training now. You've learned a little bit how you can increase that strength training, add Tai Chi to this, and you have a significant adjunct to improving your balance. So all of these things affect one's, or predict one's fall. Down at the bottom, just a reminder to me that the next slide coming up is home environment. This is a big issue. I hope that's not your house. You know, as a kid growing up, going to college, having a family, going back to visit my parents' house, I swear, their house got smaller every time I went back. It just sort of closed in with, I can't even tell you with what, furniture, clutter, whatever. But this kind of an environment is just setting you up for a fall. Things that you don't even notice. It may be because of your vision. It may be because of medications that you're taking. And these are all concerns in fall prevention. And there are expert people that that will come to your home and help identify risks for you, things that you might do to improve that. I don't know if Little Company has such a contact, but Beach Cities Health District does. Contact those individuals and they can set you up with an organization that will help you in the home environment. So how does Tai Chi help in this? Well, we've talked a little bit about improved safety and fear reduction, stability, the onset of fall. So those names that are after those terms are people who have done the research. This is good science that has been published in good medical journals. Tai Chi is three-dimensional, as I've mentioned. You have to change your head and eye position, so you change your focus, which requires a stimulus to become rebalanced, and it causes weight transference throughout the entire movement. So it's not like weight training where we're standing still, we're actually moving repetitively in fluid patterns. I don't think Tai Chi should be done alone. I think it should be a part of a comprehensive program that includes exactly what you're doing now. Your endurance exercise, your resistance training, but I would consider adding Tai Chi, even if it's a day a week. The evidence shows that we ought to try to do it 2 days a week, and the benefit comes after we've done a total of about 50 hours. So that sounds like a distant goal, but you're going to improve a little bit every time you do it. Okay? But I think optimal benefit comes after that time. We get the most benefit for balance and fall reduction if we include resistance training, particularly of the lower extremity.
Careful.
Do you do this exercise? Leg extension? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. That's a great exercise for this muscle, quadriceps muscle. If you want to make that muscle bigger, good exercise. It's a good exercise if you're a soccer player. It'll help you kick the ball harder. It's a good exercise if you're a field goal kicker as well. But in terms of everyday function, not so good. It doesn't help us walk better, more easily, stand up from a chair more easily. The ideal exercise to do is an exercise in which our feet are in contact with some surface, whether it's a leg press. Do you do that exercise?
We
You
used
do.
a new step.
Okay, so leg press machine, yeah, that's great. There's a wonderful exercise. I wish I thought to bring the picture of it. I have a picture of Carol and Mary Lou and I think maybe Chick doing what is called a ball squat or a wall squat. You know the big stability balls? Big Swiss balls? So you put that behind your back and you just gradually squat down, leaning against this ball. Great support to the back, very progressive, feet are in contact with the ground, fabulous exercise. Invite me down to your gym sometime and I'll show you. So,
Consider yourself invited.
I'm sorry?
Consider yourself invited anytime.
Oh, thanks.
You're convenient.
So, I want to talk to you about how Tai Chi has been studied in people with COPD. Okay, that seems a relevant topic. So, in this one study published just a couple of years ago, 1 hour twice a week of Tai Chi done over a 12-week period showed significant improvement in the chronic respiratory questionnaire. So this is a questionnaire asking people about how their breathing has changed, whether their activities of daily living are easier, their overall quality of life. Statistically, there was not a statistically significant improvement. So the euphemism for that is we call it a trend towards improvement in a common measure of function in COPD, and that's the 6-minute walk. My bet is that many of you have done the 6-minute walk test at one time or another. Well, here's what's cool about this. The group who didn't exercise in 12 weeks walked 13 meters less in 6 minutes. Whereas on average, the group who did the Tai Chi walked 55 meters further. You may not know this, but that's a very important number. In medicine today, there is something that is called the minimal clinically important difference. In other words, how much of a change must occur before it's meaningful to your doctor, meaningful to you as a person. Well, it turns out that that MCID, minimal clinically important difference, is 54 meters. So on average, this was a significant finding, even though it wasn't statistically significant. It didn't change aerobic capacity or VO2 max. This was a little bit more involved study that looked at more things. This was published a year ago with a large number of COPD patients who were divided up into 3 groups at random. Best kind of study to do when you randomize in advance. So 70 people did Tai Chi. 69 people did their standard aerobic exercise program plus breathing exercise such as pursed lip breathing. And others did what was called usual care. It's hard for me to believe anymore that usual care does not include exercise for people with COPD. But these were people who were not involved in any sort of a pulmonary rehab program. So the numbers of subjects about the same. They went through their training. There was better compliance in the Tai Chi group. In other words, only 14% dropped out of the Tai Chi group, whereas 28% dropped out of the breathing and walking group. About the same people dropped out of the study who were in the usual care group. So that's the overall design of the study. This is what is important. Measures were taken for several variables at 6 weeks into training and at 12 weeks into training. This first one is a change in forced vital capacity, another one of the primary measures of lung function. The blue bars represent the measurement at 6 weeks. The green bars represent the measurement at 12 weeks. You'll see that at both time intervals, the Tai Chi group had a bigger change than the exercise group, and they were bigger than the control group, who actually decreased a little bit. Okay. The nice thing here is we show a significant improvement in a measure of lung function that was greater than the typical standard exercise program. FEV1, the other measure that's critical for lung function in COPD, and we see the same pattern. Better improvement doing Tai Chi than in the breathing exercise group or in the control, who actually dropped a little bit. 6-minute walk distance. This is similar, not quite the same, as the previous study I showed you, but at 12 weeks, there was an average improvement of about 35 meters. Okay, it didn't meet the MCID, but for 12 weeks of Tai Chi, pretty darn good. And of course, obviously better than the other two groups. You all know what exacerbations are, those of you who have COPD. It's not pleasant, it's uncomfortable, sometimes puts you in the hospital. You have to recover from that and not always start over, but we have to come back from that, and we should. The number of exacerbations in the Tai Chi group were far lower than in the breathing and exercise, and certainly in the control group. So I think here are 4 very nice pieces of evidence for some specific value of Tai Chi. How much time do I have? 10?
We have till
5?
2.
Okay, well,
But
I
we
only
can go longer, don't
I
we?
only want to take 5 minutes because I want to answer some questions as well. This is my friend Jay Goldfarb, who lives in Basel, Switzerland, and is the director of a foundation there called Living Tao. Tao is a Chinese philosophy. He's been teaching Tai Chi for almost 40 years. Miraculous as a Caucasian. He put together some video clips for me that, if this works seamlessly, we'll have a look at. Now, he took the sound off, and these first few are just still pictures. If the internet connection is fast enough and we go, we'll look at these, otherwise we'll just press on. So one of the first things that he wanted you to know is the vast number of people outside of China, i.e. in the United States, that are doing Tai Chi. I think it's the next picture. They talk about fighting the problems in the city. People in Central Park in New York City meet every day, and there are sometimes hundreds of people. This is a warm-up exercise, 7 a.m. This is Central Park. So just warm-up kinds of things. Okay, so that's enough of that. So, jump in with me. The first part, there is a progression in Tai Chi from things that are very easy, that are even done sitting. There's a sitting form of Tai Chi. And then it progresses to more difficult, what they call forms or movements. So this first thing we're going to do is sitting. And it speaks to the basic philosophy of Tai Chi, and that is becoming centered within your body, knowing where your body is in space, get an idea of how your body feels. So what I'd like you to do, 2 fingers, sit up tall, 2 fingers below your umbilicus, your belly button. I can say belly button.
Yeah.
So 2 fingers below your belly button. So now, I'm going to have you close your eyes and feel that as the center of your universe right now. And then what I'd like you to do is very slowly draw your belly in, so you're pulling it back towards your spine, and then relax it. And again, drawing it in and relaxing it. Trying to focus on this particular movement and your breathing. Okay, so that's a very basic exercise. It's done as a preparatory movement and for relaxation. You can do this anytime, anywhere. Second one, sit to stand transitions. So if you would like to do this, have a partner. The partner is going to watch and coach if necessary. When we stand up, we tend to stand up leading with our heads and our shoulders, like this. So what this exercise does, and if you need to, scoot further forward on your chair, it might be easier. Try to lift yourself from your middle. So now your head and shoulders are high, but you're going to do the work from your middle.
Oh, that's hard.
It's a little bit harder. Try it again. Lift from the middle. Do you find you're using more legs now?
Yes.
As you should, right? Okay. Once more. Lift from the middle. Better posture. Your back stays straight. More leg work. All good. Okay. So this is a little bit more fun. If you can, those of you who wish to, just stand up, sort of stagger yourself, because we're going to be doing a little bit of arm movement here. This is fabulous for people with COPD because it expands the chest and the lungs. So we start here as if we're holding a ball. And then as we inhale, we pull back as far as you can. Chest is out, head is high, and we come back, exhaling. So inhale, everything is slow and deliberate, and come back together. Remember, this is moving meditation. So we sort of have to focus on the moment, the activity that we're doing. Inhaling and exhaling. Once more, big inhale this time, and exhale. Okay, thank you. So some of you probably felt a little stretching in your shoulders. That's a good thing. In our era of too much sitting, too much computer time, we developed this posture. How many of you use a computer? Yeah. So we developed, most people don't do it this way, right? Most people do this. Okay? Tight shoulders, round back. Guess what this does for people who have COPD? Makes it harder to breathe. Okay? So we want to keep that chest expanded. Okay, last one, the most fun. Up again. Okay, so now we're going to have our imaginary ball here. And very slowly, we're going to turn it. And turn it again. And again, slow. Everybody's too fast. Slow. Okay, so now widen your feet. And now, as we turn left on top of right, we're going to turn to the right. As we turn left to right, we're going to turn over to the left. And now, come back to center. And this time, try to shift your weight, which means as we go to my right, you're going to try to put your weight on your right foot. And back. Now the weight goes to your left foot. And back to the right foot. Okay? Simple beginning exercises. This emphasizes weight transfer. As we learn how to better transfer our weight, our balance improves. And over time, we start doing more difficult things. Okay, just to finish up here. So, Oliver Wendell Holmes, former Chief Justice. People do not quit playing because they grow old. They grow old because they stop playing. I mean, I like to think of exercise as playtime. I have a very good friend who still calls me up, and his phrase is, Tommy, calls me Tommy. Let's go play. Well,
I like that.
playing to Bill is a 4 or 5 mile run or a 15-mile bike ride, and it is fun. It is fun. And I hope that your environment for your exercise training is fun. Once you get involved with the Tai Chi, it's going to be fun. Everybody who does it reports how much fun it is. Otherwise, people wouldn't be doing it. Okay. It is fun. So, just last, I turned 65 last year, and I started contemplating this a little bit, and so I came up with this. I'm older. There's no doubt about it, and there are some things I cannot do, but I'm still a mature teenager. It comes right down to it. And I like to play, and I like to have a good time. I like to be with people and stay involved. And you should give yourself a big hand for doing those things in this group. It's absolutely fabulous. Okay, so I have a couple of minutes that I would be happy to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Where do we find Tai Chi?
Where do you find it? I don't know. Margaret has an answer.
If you check the South Bay Adult Education.
Yes, they have it.
Okay, good. That's a great idea. Beach City's Health District may even have it.
And the Torrance Adult School have it.
Torrance Adult School.
Redondo
Okay.
Beach Adult School, Veterans Park.
One of the things that I have learned about Tai Chi, doing Tai Chi, is you need to have a good instructor. Ideally, a master instructor who really knows what they're doing. So as you explore this, I don't know that I wouldn't do it because you didn't have a master instructor. But I think I might want to ask, what their training is and how long they've been doing it. And then if you have choices, I might go with the better choice. Sir?
What is the trade-off between doing, say, strength training with a heavier weight, 10 to 12 reps, several sets, versus doing it with a lighter weight and more repetitions?
Yeah.
I mean, 30 repetitions,
Yeah.
hypothetically.
That's a great question. I hear it all the time. His question was, what is the trade-off? What am I getting differently if I lift heavier, say 8 to 12 maximal repetitions, as opposed to, say, using a lighter weight and doing 30 repetitions? It's all about the stimulus you're giving to the muscle itself. The heavier the load, the more muscle fibers are recruited to lift the weight. So you're training more muscle fibers. As a consequence, the muscle is going to get stronger and it's going to get bigger. Bigger muscles are good. Terry, Ruby, you'll have to help me remember this lady's name. Older, she was Beverly Schwartz. Beverly Schwartz. Beverly Schwartz, this little bitty lady, if she was 90 pounds, she was 500. I mean, she was little, but she went after weight training like nobody's business. Significant COPD. And I was applauding her one day and noticing she was getting bigger. Her arms were getting bigger. She says, if I get any bigger, I'm going to get a tattoo. I'll never, ever. So bigger muscle is good because you expend more energy. It's like turning up the furnace or getting a bigger furnace. Your metabolic rate goes up, and that helps with weight control. So that's good. You're stronger. It's easier to do things. Yeah, I said more control over your weight. With 30 repetitions, your muscle's not going to grow as big. It's not going to get as strong. You're not going to recruit as many fibers. But the fibers you do recruit are going to become much more resistant to fatigue. So if you need to do lots and lots of repetitive things in the course of your day, that would be a type of training I would do.
You mentioned a high-resistant interval training, and to do it once a week would be your recommendation. Does that mean the other days you would do just normal?
Your regular training.
Okay.
Yes. And by regular training, I think the guideline, I know the guidelines now for older adults, and which are very similar for people with COPD, is moderate exercise. So by moderate exercise, you're right at the edge of starting to breathe hard.
Okay.
Start.
For the interval training on a treadmill, would you recommend to increase stress by increasing the elevation or the speed?
Great, absolutely great question. Back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, pulmonary rehab didn't even use resistance training. They mostly used cycle training because it's inexpensive and it didn't take up much space. But it wasn't very specific to the things that people do every day, which is walking. You know, we walk, we climb stairs. So it would be good to weight bear. But in the earlier days of COPD, they never walked up a slope. Okay? And my presumption was, I never knew for sure, but my presumption was because it was considered to be too strenuous. Okay? Today, grade walking is very common. The advantage to grade walking is you don't have to walk as fast. Some people get uncomfortable when the speed gets too high. It becomes frightening. Okay? And in order to get the level of exertion you might want, you don't want to go up faster, so your next step is to just increase the grade a bit. Okay? It's a great way to do your intervals. So you might be walking at, say, 2.5 miles an hour on the horizontal treadmill, and then maybe for a minute you raise the grade to 2.5%, and then back down again. Yeah, great question. Terry.
Tom, I'm really inspired again. I've become quite lazy, and I'm not exercising the way I used to. And one of the things that inspired me was you're saying that you could actually raise your FEV1.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And I just was happy if I could maintain it. How much could you hope for?
Yeah, you know, there's not a lot of data that have shown that that happens, but there is some. The study that I showed you in which there was a significant bump in FEV1. Now, let me go back to give you some numbers so we can put this into perspective. Sorry. So the Tai Chi group improved maybe 7/10 of a liter. 7/10 of a liter, if you're at 1.5 liters, is pretty darn good. I mean, that's almost a 50% improvement, right? So this was done in 12 weeks in a group of people with COPD. Possible. And you made a very important point that I want to echo to everybody. Sometimes staying the same is a great outcome, right? Okay. Not deteriorating is good. If we can get better, great. But not getting worse is also good. Thank you all. Yes?
You said you were getting funding for a study from Boston University. Will that be done at UCLA at all?
No.
No, okay, too bad. Because I was going to ask if Castleberry was going to do anything with
Not that I know of.
interval training would be excellent if you could do it there. 'Cause
Yeah, sure. My hope for Betsy and Jackie would be if they think that this is something to explore, see if you can find a Tai Chi person. You know, maybe there's even somebody at the hospital who is a Tai Chi practitioner. You know, it's certainly worth looking into.
They have a class of it at Memorial Torrance.
Torrance Memorial. Is that sacrilege?
He's a good guy. I took it.
Hey, we're all
You did?
done.
Did you like it?
Yes, very much.
Very much. Okay, good. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to see all my friends from